Oh,
Yeah, I remember when we
okay.
hung out in Warsaw that time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so Steven, let me introduce you, Małgosia Neczyperowicz.
Hello.
Małgosia is a graduate in Academy of Dramatic Arts in Poland, and she's the former student of our Laboratorium Meisnera too. And
Great,
she
great.
wrote an MA thesis on Meisner Technique.
Excellent.
And
I like it.
I will introduce you in a short bit. But now, as I mentioned, we have a plan with our foundation, Act for Art, spreading Sanford Meisner's work to publish her work.
Great, great.
But Gosia told me that her dream was to add another chapter to her work and to the to be published book. And that's why we invited you to do the interview. And thank you so much for.
Well,
for
I'm
agreeing.
honored. Thank you. Glad you
Thank
thought
you.
of me. Yeah.
So,
How do you pronounce your name?
Gosia.
Gosha.
Gosia,
Gosha.
the short form.
Yes,
The short
it's the
form,
short
yeah.
form.
The short form.
Małgorzata.
Yeah, the
Gosha,
longer
great.
is, yeah. It's,
Oh, nice to meet you, Gosha.
Thank you. Nice to meet you too.
Yeah.
Okay, so Gosia, Steven Ditmyer, I don't have to introduce you to him because you know that he's a renowned Meisner Technique coach and teacher. He teaches internationally. He's also an actor, and Steven studied in the Neighborhood Playhouse School of the Theater, from
Yes.
what I know, and then you teach there too.
No, I don't. I mean, I used to work there years ago, and I taught at different schools here in New York City. I taught at American Academy. It's called the American Academy of Dramatic Arts. Yeah, and I was asked back to the Playhouse. I graduated in '93, and then I was asked back like 12 years later to help put together the 85th or the 80th anniversary of the Playhouse.
Wow,
Yeah,
amazing.
and we did a big thing, and so I put that together, and then I was working with the school to promote the school. Yeah.
Great.
So. And
Okay,
mostly, and I'm a director, is what, a lot of people say actor, and I act occasionally now, but what I really do is I'm a director, acting coach.
Okay. And how did you begin your adventure with Meisner's technique?
With when I first learned it, or when I first studied with him, or years later when teaching, do you mean?
Beginning, so the first time.
Yeah, I was in college, I was in university, and in Florida, and I was a musician, and I thought I was going to be a professional musician. And as I was, and I had a band, and I was studying music, and then I'll make it a short story, but I actually was asked to be on that show Miami Vice. Do you remember Miami Vice, the show that was filmed in Florida? And I got to do a small little thing on it because I met the casting director, this and that, and because of, just because of my look, of how I looked. And I did that, and I watched them, the actors, I watched them film all day, and I was so interested in it. And I said, wow, this acting thing looks really, I love music. And I always, when I was performing music, I was really putting a show on as I performed, and I said, wow, this acting thing looks really cool. And I asked this casting director, this agent I had for my band, I said, hey, do you know anything about this acting thing? Because she was an agent for actors too. And she said, yeah, you should study the school, the college, the university you're at. They have a whole theater department. You should take some classes. I was in the business school end of it. So I started taking some classes. I say that because I studied there. I started taking acting classes in university. And I was very lucky that I studied with this, one of the most amazing actors in the world named Zoe Caldwell. and four-time Tony Award-winning Zoe Caldwell that was with the Royal Shakespeare Company, and she won many Tonys on Broadway, and she studied and she did every time she acted, she won every award in London and New York. She was studying with me. I mean, I was studying with her in university, and her husband was the president, very famous producer. He produced all of Arthur Miller's plays. He was the president of Neighborhood Playhouse in New York City. And when I studied with her, she said, she saw I really didn't know anything when I was a young actor what I was doing. I had no clue what I was doing. But I had enthusiasm, you know. I was really passionate about it, and I wanted to learn, but I had no clue what I was doing. And she said, she took me aside. She said, Steven, you should go to New York City and study with Sanford Meisner at the Neighborhood Playhouse. And I hadn't heard of him before. You know, I was young. I was in my 20s, early 20s in Florida. And she said that.
What year was it?
This is 1990.
1990. Okay,
yeah.
7 years before he's passing.
Yeah, he passed in 97. And she said, you need to go and study with him. And because it was Zoe Caldwell, this incredible actress, I said, yes, whatever you say. You know. And I went to New York, and she did a recommendation letter for me, and you had to interview at the time. It was really neat at the time. One thing different about Meisner too is different than all other schools. You didn't audition. You didn't audition because he didn't care how well you could do an audition, how well you can perform a monologue. You know, he said, we need to talk just for a half an hour. And
wow.
There's famous stories, you know, because he said, let's talk and let's see, let's not only, you know, I want to hear, why do you say you want to learn about acting, and you want to, you know, become a stronger actor, and you want to come study with me, and I want to learn about you, he said, and you learn about me. And not only, let's see, are you a good fit for me? Am I a good fit for you? And there's famous stories. The famous actor Dustin Hoffman, you know, did his interview with Meisner, and Meisner didn't accept him.
Oh my, I didn't know about that.
Yeah, Meisner didn't accept him. He said he was too quirky, too nervous, you know, it's like, no. And, you know, it's just because Meisner doesn't accept you, you can still go on and be a great actor, you know, which he did. But yeah, so it was an interview, no audition at all. Nowadays, they do an interview and an audition, and mostly they do the audition because they want to see that how well you speak English. That's basically what how well you can speak English. But it's all about the interview. So I interviewed, and I got accepted. And I think the letter from Zoe Caldwell helped, you know, and that was so I started in 91 studying with Sandy, and it was Sandy, and he was older at the time. We were, believe it or not, the last class to have him. This was the last class to study with him at the Playhouse, was 91 to 92. We had a main teacher, and he was, I believe, the strongest Meisner teacher in the world. You've probably heard of William Esper.
Yeah.
You know, who passed away recently. And William Esper and this man that I studied with, Richard Penter. His name was Richard Penter, Pinter. The two of them both had studied and were Meisner's assistant for many, many years. And Esper left the Playhouse and went and he's taught at a college, a university in New Jersey called Rutgers University. And that's how he got known, because he developed the theater department at this university in New Jersey. And Penter stayed at the Playhouse. So Penter was the main teacher at the Neighborhood Playhouse, and Esper was this teacher at this university, Rutgers. And they were the two top Meisner teachers, I believe, in the world. And I was lucky. So I had Penter and Meisner, you know, because Meisner wasn't there every day, but he was there every 2 days, 3 days. Yeah.
You're an actor. Do you still perform?
Uh, Occasionally. I didn't, I was an actor in New York City after I graduated studying with Meisner. I then studied a year with Uta Hagen, a great teacher named Uta Hagen. Very lucky. And that's a whole nother thing I talk to some
I
people
have
about.
the book of Uta Hagen.
Yeah. So I studied with Uta. How lucky. I had Meisner
Yes,
and then
you're
Uta.
very lucky.
And also I tell people it was very lucky, Judy, that I had it in that order. It would have been, because Meisner, as you know, and a lot of us that teach Meisner, and I always tell people, all my students, you have to do different techniques. I don't go around saying Meisner is the only way. We have to be like sponges, right? We have to take in all these different things, and ultimately it's what works for you. But I teach Meisner all over the world because it's the strongest foundation that I have found from doing all different techniques. And, I use all kinds of different things, but I always, as a director and as an actor, keep coming back to the Meisner work. I'll use the little things I learned from Uta Hagen, things I learned from Zoe, things I learned, but the basis of acting, the foundation, I have found there's nothing stronger as for the foundation. Everything keeps coming back to Meisner.
Yeah, and also what the actors that come to our studio say is that it's like very consistent system. It's a whole system, and you go step by step, and nobody actually teaches you this
Right.
in the dramatic academy or
Yes.
acting school.
A school, universities and schools, their goal is to give you a well-rounded education. So in doing that, and in many acting academies and this and that, so what you do is you get a taste of this, a taste of, you do some Meisner, you do some Gutowski, you do Suzuki, you do all these different things to give you a well-rounded education, to give you a whole bunch of tools, right? The problem is there's a pro and con to that. The pro is you get to learn some different things, right? The con to that is you never really go down a full process, and it actually, it actually in the long run doesn't help you. I find from my experience, I'm not, and I tell my students, I don't say don't go to university. I say, yes, do, for life experience and to learn different things. But if you really want to really learn about acting, it's not possible getting little touches, little things of different. You have to go through a full process, which you have, discovered. It's a whole different thing to go through that process. It's a whole different story. Yeah.
What fascinated you the most in Meisner's technique that you decided to teach it?
Decide to teach it. I didn't, when I studied with Meisner, and back then, if you would have told me when I was studying with him that I was going to teach all over the world Meisner, or even teach it, even try to teach it, I would have laughed at your face and said, "Are you crazy? This is the hardest thing in the world I've ever done in my life. I could never teach this." So it's funny. I never thought I was going to teach. I thought I was going to be an actor. And what's funny is when I did the second year play, you finish your 2 years with a play, and I had a lead role in this Arthur Miller play, which Arthur Miller came to see.
Wow. Impressive.
The director of that play, it wasn't Meisner, it was another director, a great man, great director that was brought in, a guest director. He said to me, "You're going to be a director." And and people told me that I was going to be a director and stuff. And I said, "What? I'm an actor. Come on, I'm an actor." So I couldn't see it. But so years later, as I was acting, I kept they saw there was that thing in me, that I had that thing to direct. I was an okay actor, and I learned from Meisner, Uta Hagen, and I was an okay actor. But what I was really meant to do was direct and teach. And I had to find that, Judy. Like, it took me 10 years later, years later, being an actor in New York, people were asking me to in theater companies, I would do something. I would work as an actor, and how I worked and everything, they would ask me to direct something, and I just started directing more and more. And then from when I started really directing a lot, then I was asked by that Richard Pinter to come back to the neighborhood playhouse. Well, it was actually the director of the playhouse, to come back and train as a teacher for a year and a half. But I say that because I never knew I was going to teach. I never even thought about it, or even be a director. But then you start finding what, it takes years. You start finding what you're good at and what you're meant to do. So then it came really from directing. I've started directing a lot. And from directing, like I said, is that I kept coming back. When I was working with actors, I found I had to help them a lot, to do these things that Meisner was demanded of us, the process demanded of us, and I knew how to help them. It really has helped me be a strong director. It's gone like this, the work, the Meisner work and directing is just gone like this. And there's a great, the great American director, filmmaker, Sidney Pollack, who directed everybody, and great famous films. He was Meisner's assistant for 6 years, and I think
he
that's
wrote an introduction to his book,
right.
right, on
Yeah,
acting. Mm-hmm.
and I think, and he was known as an actor's director. You understand? He was, everyone talked about because he knew how to work with actors. That's how, and I find that I'm the same way. I'm not a conceptual director. I'm not the director that's going to make it motorcycles and and do all this concept. I don't do that at all. I'm like the worst at making, if you want to see some experimental new concept of a play, I don't do it at all. All I do is bring the play to life, moment to moment, truthfully, every moment. That's all I'm after. So I find there's, in a basic sense, there's two categories: a conceptual director and a straight director, just that gets right, that cares about the acting. And so this work is also, so why I started was because started teaching was because of directing, and it brought me back to the Meisner work so much that I had learned years before.
In what system do you teach Meisner's technique? Do you have any program?
In what system or what?
Yes. In what do you have any program of teaching Meisner's technique?
You mean like, did I set up a program?
Yes.
Yeah, that's a good question, because because I teach, when I was at schools here, different schools, then you have a long time, you have a class that goes a year with you, or it goes, 6 months, 4 months with you as a semester, and then another 4 months in another semester. And you go through that process that Judy just talked about, the whole process. Or if you have like Judy's school, you can take a group through that process. When I started this Meisner International, and to take it all around the world, because I started finding that when you teach in New York City, you have students from all over the world. And I was having students all the time saying, I learned more from you in 1 week than I did 3 months, in some other country. Because, not to say that there's not some good Meisner teachers, there are, but there's a lot, and Judy probably knows, there's a lot that don't know, Meisner's being taught everywhere, and everyone does a little bit of Meisner, and they don't really know the work. And so I said, whoa, wait a minute, I gotta spread the real work around, and really get people to understand the real work. So I teach 5-day workshops, and there's pros and cons to that. The con is you're not doing a whole 6 months or something with me. But the pro is I work with a lot of professional actors all over the world, and they get they're busy working anyway and doing stuff. So they can't go and do a school, or they already went to drama school, you know, in London or somewhere. So what it helps them to do a 5-day class or 10 days, you know, if they do two. And then every time they're free, I broke it up into different levels. So I've broken the work up into like 9 levels of the work. So that's the system is and it's interesting, Judy will find this interesting, is that what we did, each level that I do in 5 days was like 3 weeks, is like what 3 weeks is that we did with Meisner. 3 to 4 weeks in 5 days.
So it's super intense, right?
It's super intense, but
many
it's
hours a day? How
huh?
many hours a day?
Just like what you saw at the thing, we do 4 hours a day for 5 days, but it's you know, there's a couple reasons why it's different. With Meisner, we had 25 students, 24 students, you know, you had 24 students at the Playhouse, and you worked all 5 days, you had acting, but you only got up and worked every 3rd day, you know? So you watched a lot and you got up and worked every 3rd day. And it was a slower process to go through everyone, and there's some good in that. It takes time to absorb the work, but there's also, I found, you can get much quicker right into it, you know, and to help you in these 5 days. The first workshops, what I call workshop 1, workshop 2, are in some ways the hardest, and in other ways not. They're harder in the sense of being hit with all these things, Judy, you know, that for even actors been acting 30 years and everything, they're hit with this, what the hell, what you're telling me, I'm not being truthful right now. They're used to, you know, and they're trying to intellectually understand this technique. And the funny thing about it is, it's all about not intellectual, not so, you know, how we've all experienced it. You have to go through that time. You know, you have to go through that time to realize that you can't think your way through it. You can't understand it. You know, you're trying to go home and understand it, and you actually have to let go of all that. That takes a little doing. I find that my first 2 workshops, that's when it happens. And that's 10 days. That's 5 days and 5 days. But it starts to happen because, like you said, it's really intense, but we're really working every day and really getting right to it, and not going real slow like we did with 24 people for 3 weeks, you know. So yeah, so I break it down into these different workshops, these levels that we just keep. It's exactly the process that Meisner did, by, you know, and
So
by
starting with the repetition, then the independent activity, yeah, the whole like.
Oh, it's the next question. Which exercise from Meisner's technique do you use in teaching? And specify them and tell me about them precisely, please.
Well, do you have 4 hours? We can. Well, in the fast versions of it is, well, first I thought your first part of the question is, I teach all of it. You know, there's no, you know, it's like you said, you have to, but you teach the whole process, but it's a process, and you can't really skip too much. You know, there's some things you'll find this, Judy, you know, there's some things that I can take someone there's no way in the world that you can work with an actor and they can join for the first time and do my workshop 3 or 4, you know, emotional preparation, or do relationships without the first 2 workshops. It's impossible. But once you start doing once you start getting those first workshops done, those first part of the process, then you can play a little bit. You know, Judy, I found I can work with someone on relationships, you know, and how to craft relationships, even if they haven't done emotional prep or something, you know what I mean? But because they have They really know repetition, what it's there for. They really know how to follow every impulse, listen 100%, you know, trust their instincts, know how to come to the door, know how to do an activity that put all their focus on something and really do it and let go of the brain and still respond to someone. All those things. Once they start doing that, then they can play with different things out of order in the more advanced workshops. And so I teach all of them, but there's no every actor, no matter what level they are, how much experience they have as an actor. And it's one thing I love about this work is it doesn't matter what level you are. You could be an actor that's been I work with actors from the National Theater of Helsinki. You know what I mean? The National Theater. And some of them won't do the class because they've been actors for 30 years. And some of them are very brave and they do the work. And it's very brave because they're in class with someone that's never acted before. That's all. And it doesn't matter because everything shows. So I do all the parts of the process. I teach. I've broken it down into different levels. And what was the second part of your question? How?
To specify, yeah, Gosia.
Oh, you want
You have to unmute.
Specify this
different
exercise
workshop levels?
and specify them and tell me about them precisely, about this exercise.
Yeah, I mean, I can tell you, as Judy knows, I like I said, that's why I said you have 4 hours. I could talk, you know, each part of the process. There's so much, there's a lot to learn, but I can do it in a short, basic way. Like I said, I break it into like 9 workshops, and the first workshop is called repetition, the foundation of Meisner, which is the repetition. I want to say something about it because a lot of people think, one reason I started teaching all over the world is because I found that people think, a lot of actors, they saw some repetition, or they saw someone in London or someone doing repetition, and they were like, what the hell is that? This is stupid. How can this help me in my acting? Understand? Because they saw 2 people go, you have a blue shirt, I have a blue shirt, you have a blue shirt, I have a blue shirt, you have a blue shirt. And they're like, that's bull crap. That's nothing. That's not acting. Well, yeah, that's because shouldn't be like that. You know what I mean? Right? You know? So I say that because this first level of repetition, working repetition, you really got to learn some things from it. Like I said, you can't do the later levels without learning what repetition is really about. It's not really about repeating. Who cares about repeating? It's about really connecting, really listening, you know, so you are not self-aware. That second biggest problem actors have all around the world is being self-conscious, right? So that's really what the first workshop's about, is to get you off of yourself. So then you can be free to follow every impulse, right? But what gets in our way? The brain. You know, the brain gets in our way so much. To think, we want to think. The brain wants to categorize everything, wants to figure out everything, wants to make intellectual sense of it. And it's so fun in the first workshops to tell people it doesn't make intellectual sense. It's emotional sense, and emotional sense goes all over the place. You know, so that's the first workshop, and it's very important. Then I can start, and there's different things. I could talk for an hour just about the first workshop. In that first workshop, Judy, I do, as you saw, we start coming to the door, even in that first workshop. See, with Meisner, we would wait 3 weeks and then we'd start coming to the door. We'd do repetition for 3 weeks. You can still once you start learning repetition, you're going to always keep practicing that, but you can start adding things to it. You know, you start coming to the door, and that's a huge step in the work, because all of a sudden we've added imaginary circumstances coming to the door. So that's the next step in it. I introduced that in the first workshop. And then the second workshop is called Independent Activities, where I don't introduce activities until that second workshop, because now we started to learn about, we're doing repetition. We still got to get much stronger at it. We're going to start coming to the door. It's imaginary circumstances, but you learn there's nothing different. Just because there's imaginary circumstances doesn't mean you pretend anything, right? And that's what that does. That's why Meisner was so smart, right? It's amazing what a genius he was, is how you start adding in the process, these things that you have to deal with as an actor. You have to be in imaginary circumstances, even though it's real. So the second one, independent activities, and to specifically to acting's doing, right? And the first thing we learned is listening. But there's more than just listening and doing, right? And so we start learning about how I have to do whatever I'm doing. I have to put 100% into it. You know, Meisner said the quality of your acting depends on how fully you do what you're doing. If you do something at 50%, your acting's at 50%. I love it. And if you at 70, if you do something 100%, then your doing is 100%. It's harder, as we know, it's much harder than it sounds, to put 100% into what I'm doing. It reminds me of, oh my gosh, when I worked with Meisner and we started these activities, it was so hard. He stopped us every second saying, "You're not really doing that." I'm like, "What? I'm trying. What do you mean?
How am I supposed to do it?"
Yeah, what are you talking about? I'm trying. He's like, "No, you're not. You're not doing that. You're thinking. You're listening. You're acting. You're thinking. You're self-conscious. You can't do something 100% if you're thinking, if you're self-conscious. When all of a sudden you're doing something 100% that takes your focus, the audience can tell, just like all the other actors in the class. You can tell, because what's the sign? Because you lose awareness of yourself.
Yeah.
And the actor starts doing things that they can't even control. And then the audience goes, "Wow." Yeah. And so it was really tough. I must have done the first year with Meisner like 50 activities, and I remember one for sure, and maybe twice did everything work. Twice that everything worked. Otherwise, there was what you learn is something was good about it, but I was missing this, or I wasn't specific with that, or this part was good, I was specific, but I didn't use my imagination correctly, or all that you start, as we went through, it's tough as hell, and I only remember twice that everything worked. Everything.
Incredible. Yeah, it's very complex. You have a lot of elements to combine, and
Yeah, don't you find that? But what's funny is and everything we do, and what's also good about the work is, and why it's a real process, is it's all about being simple.
Less is more, as they say.
It's all about being simple. You have to go through these things that feel like it's complex, just like even when people first do repetition and they're told certain things, you don't pause, you're thinking. It sounds like rules, right? Like, don't pause. I'm really big on don't ask questions. Esper was a little more lenient. He let people ask questions, but he would tell them if it was from here or from here. You could ask question, but if it comes from your gut and emotions, what you're feeling, that's okay. I don't let people do questions at all for a long time, because why? Because we're doing 5 days, and it's a fast track on forcing you not to think. It forces you to say what you mean without asking a question. Are you mad at me? Take a risk to be wrong. Say, you're mad at me.
Yeah.
It's way more direct. So the independent activities really teaches you a lot. And then from that, I teach my third workshop, I call emotional preparation. I mean, as we know, but so because you can work on that, the only way you can work on emotional preparation is if you, to put it into the exercise, is if you've done 1 and 2, if you've done repetition, you've done coming to the door, and you've done activities. So, so, but emotional prep is its own thing, its own kind of animal. I don't know how you find it, Judy, but you know, it's its own thing to work on, you know? And so I have people that can do my workshop 4, which is um, uh, relationships. And relationships, I break down into 2 workshops, workshop 4 and workshop 5. Relationships that are not living together, as we know, because there's 2, you know, not living together. So someone has to come and knock on the door. And then workshop 5 is the domestic exercise, relationships that you live together, because that changes some things. But people can do, so people can do workshop. I found, and not just from doing the work, I found that, oh, you can do workshop 4 without having done workshop 3, emotional prep, but you have to have done 1 and 2, you know, the activities and coming through the door. And then because then they might they'll do emotional prep some other time when I'm back in that country, and the emotional prep workshop, my 5 days is 3 days of alone. You're working alone, coming alone into a room, from learning how to actually do the emotional prep outside the door. It's about coming in, right? How you enter emotionally, entering emotionally alive, because we're always coming from somewhere, right? They do that alone. Then the last 2 days they're doing it. Then we add it back into the workshop. Someone's at home doing an activity, and then someone's coming to the door with an emotional prep. Um, and what I was going to say about that workshop is that's the workshop that most actors that I work with, especially professional actors, they do more than once. They do over and over and over again, because they really want to, it's something to really work on, you know. Takes a while. Meisner said it's the most delicate work of an actor, and it takes 5 years to master.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Most importantly, the working of your imagination, right? The imaginary circumstance, because we as actors have this tendency to work, you know, based on our past experience a lot, and
a lot.
it becomes a habit, from what I observe too. And working from your imagination is really it's a challenge. And
it's a challenge. It's not easy. It's still tough, but the rewards I find are amazing. What happens when you start to learn how to do it, and you start, like anything, like any skill, practice, and you start, it's all about discovering yourself, you know, is one big part of it. But when you start learning how to do that, the world is your oyster. I mean, you can do so many things and get anywhere, because it's your imagination, and not be stuck in yourself, not be stuck emotionally, where Meisner thought there's some problems in you know, going just to real events in your life. What he said was, and it's a great way to say it, he says, it's not that it can't work. It'll go. You think about when your dad left you at 10 years old, is going to do something to you. That's not the problem. He says it's limited. And I love that word. It's limited. It's limited to do that. Now, if you use your imagination, it's unlimited. Isn't that something? It's hard. It takes a lot of practice. Meisner says it takes 5 years to master. And I'm not kidding you. Ready for this? I had the toughest time with emotional prep when I was working with him and Richard Pinner. The toughest time. I couldn't get there, you know, and it was really tough. Imagine outside the door outside the door of 3B, where Meisner taught, was a little space and then a stairwell, all the students going down, up and down. That's where you had to do your emotional prep. and it was like, felt impossible. The good and the thing is, see, we didn't realize that was really preparing us to be anywhere, to work anywhere. You're on set, you're off stage, you're on set, you can do your emotional prep anywhere. You know what I mean? And that takes a lot of practice. But what I want to say about it is I really struggled those 2 years doing it. And then I kept and then when I was working with Uta Hagen, I was still thinking about Meisner and doing emotional prep, and I was practicing it and working as an actor, and I was in a play and I'm trying to do it off stage and I'm working on it. And I'm not kidding you, about 5 years after I first started doing it is when it all started happening. It all started clicking. Goes, isn't that something? All started clicking where I knew how to use what has meaning to me and use my imagination, and bam, magic. I do it in front of the class. In front of my classes, I do preps right in front of them, and they're all crying and everything in class. I do it in 60 seconds. It's unbelievable once you start, doing it. So emotional prep, then those 2 workshops of relationships. And what's neat about what I find, like I said, it'd be nice if we did 3 weeks, 2 weeks, 3 weeks at a school working on it. But these actors that I work with all over the world, they take over, they'll do workshop 3, they'll do workshop 3 again, they'll do workshop 4. They even come back and do a workshop 1. They're like, hey, I want to revisit it, just as a muscle, to work that muscle and listening. So it's really neat. They just do different levels at different times. But you have to do it in kind of an order, but then you can come back to any spot, because we all have different strengths and weaknesses. We all, how Judy, you'll be like, oh, I get this repetition thing, but you might be terrible with activities or how to use your imagination with activity. It's always, the work is always 2 steps forward, 5 steps back.
Yeah, also if you don't practice, you get stiff.
Yeah,
it's like with your muscles. Yeah. Kind of.
Find, I think so, but what's neat, because I have these actors that that then they'll be a month go between without working with me, and then or a month and a half or something, and then they'll work again, and they get all worried, I really have found that you don't go backwards. You might get a little stiff, but you can't go backwards as an actor in what you learn, what affects you. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like,
yeah.
Once you start learning something and you start learning about really listening to someone, and you can't go backwards. You'll know when you're not listening or not,
Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, you might feel a little rusty, but I find in that first day, once you work with me, boom, you're right back onto track, because you really, I find, don't go backwards in the work. You might be a little rusty just from doing it, but you really are always actually moving forward, even though you feel like you're going down. You're, how you're here. You were here, and it's a struggle, but you're actually here,
Yeah, also your instinct remembers the difference, and you don't get like
you're
fooled.
training your instinct. Yeah. And you're training not to use you're training a different muscle, not to use the brain muscle, to use your instincts. I really believe, Judy, that it's all the work is about strengthening the connection to your impulses. I mean, there's crafting you have to learn, but it's all about strengthening the connection to your impulses. That's where great acting comes from. You have to learn craft. You have to learn how to craft things and be specific, but none of that matters if you don't have a connection to your impulses, we can say. Then I do, after those 2 workshops of relationships, then I start getting into character work. So workshop 6 is the first part of character work in impediments, physical impediments. And we do physical impediments and pain. And workshop 7 is when you start doing drugs and alcohol. And
I love that part.
Yeah, I love that part.
So much fun.
It's a lot of fun, and and not easy, but you start learning. And just think, like we said about the process, there's no The problem that happens in universities and with a lot of schools is that don't have this process like that. Most acting classes in the world is everyone working on a scene, is you're working on a scene. And you might learn a little something about, you're doing a little streetcar, you're doing a little this, you're doing a little Tennessee Williams, you're doing some, and you might learn a little something, but you don't have any of that foundation that we just talked about. So you're just grasping at things and you don't know how. You don't have a foundation, a path of how to do it again. Like you do another scene and you're like, oh boy, and that's the difference. One reason I mention that is because all these steps that I just talked about, all that into workshop 7 there, you're not working with text yet. Different than every other acting class in the world.
Yeah.
And I have to mention the one thing I do different. And I don't know, I find it interesting, Judy, as a teacher, how this happened. And it happened because of teaching these 5-day workshops all over, is I give text the very first class. The very first class.
I remember, I asked you about it. Yeah.
I give a little text that on the 5th day they use. The reason why I started doing that is because I wanted the actors, they're doing that first 5 days. They're trying to intellectually figure out, what is this Meisner, what is this technique about? What's it about? Why are we doing this repetition? They start to get it, but it's a real struggle. We don't work with text till my 8th workshop. So I give them a little text the very first workshop so they can see how far their impulses can take them in their acting to what it can be. So they do this text on the end of that first workshop, where after 4 days of repeating and really knowing what repeating's about with a teacher that knows what it's about, then all of a sudden to do text. And it's great. Judy, it's great, especially with actors that are professional actors and stuff that have worked a lot. They can't do like they've done before. They cannot do how they're used to, acting the text, giving the text meaning instead of the meaning coming from us.
Yeah, amazing.
Yeah,
Gosha, what do you think? It's very powerful, right?
It's powerful and interesting.
Yeah.
Do you add your own exercise in these workshops?
Oh, there's a lot. It's a good question, because there's a lot of I know a couple teachers I know, what they've been doing is they know Meisner, but it's like I know a couple of them right now. They call it, they made up a name of their technique. They call it the Ditmyer method. You know what I mean? Because they learned from different people, just like I did, Uta Hagen and method, and stuff, Strasberg and stuff, and they do their own combination kind of how they work. I find it very interesting with me, even though I've worked with different techniques and different teachers, and I've learned many different things. I find that it's most important to work it straight through the process that the Meisner work, if you go really through it all, it gives you everything. There's, yes, there's different things you can learn from different, but I find that, like what I learned with Uta Hagen, maybe this will help you put it in, make sense. What I learned from Uta is like icing on the cake. It's stuff that I can, but the cake was Meisner. I mean, the stuff I learned from Uta and from Zoe Caldwell and different things are like icing and decorations on the cake and different things that I can use and things that, but the cake is Meisner. Otherwise I would just have icing. I wouldn't have the whole cake, That's
beautiful metaphor.
Yeah.
When do you work with the text in your lesson?
Yeah, that's, in the very first workshop, right, they do a short, it's like a short
Yes.
scene that Meisner, it's these scenes that Meisner
But
used.
do you have any program of work with monologues or scenes?
So then the eighth workshop I do, and sometimes I do it once, sometimes I do the scene work before character work. We do like the first scene work can be, um, before we do the character work, after we do repetition, coming to the door, emotional prep, relationships, domestic exercise. Then we can start working on a scene, the basis of a scene. I'm working on text. Um, Sometimes I do it, just how it works out. We do it after doing character work, because you can start working on a scene without character work, just learning how to work from the text. That first work that you're really working on text, really working on it, there's things to learn about that, super objectives and actions, and objectives, super objective to objective of the scene to actions, intentions. And I teach that. Meisner taught that. People don't realize, people think Meisner's all about repetition, and they don't know that's nothing. That's the baby step. That's just the very first baby step into this technique. And that's another reason why I started teaching around the world, because that's just that's just a vehicle to start you off. Then we have to really, once you start learning all these things and getting stronger and stronger, then you can start working on text. Again, like Meisner, he was very smart, different than most acting classes. He said, don't work, you can't work on text without knowing how to live 100% truthfully. But we do that. Most classes are acting. So you're just learning to act, but you're not being 100, really, let's be honest, you're not being 100% truthful. You are not what great actors do. That's why there's such a difference of what many actors do and what great actors do. It's a big difference, because and it's mysterious to everyone, because it looks like they're doing nothing, but they're 100% truthful. So it's mysterious. It's actually technique. So then I start working on text on either right after all those workshops, or after doing character work, or because you can do the text work and then you can start doing character work and do text again. So there's text work without character work. I believe, Judy, that you can do all this text work, learning how to craft from the text, how to find super objectives, actions. And you can then also add on top of that character work. But there's a lot to learn before even character work.
Yeah. So you do two workshops with the scenes, or
Yeah,
you're working with monologues too?
Two different kind of
Scene work.
scenes. I haven't done. It's funny. I haven't really done monologue workshops, but I'm going to do it now online because it's
Great.
easier to do. Yeah. So I'm setting up one that's going to start in a couple weeks from now. Something like April 29th or something, starting to do a monologue workshop. The stuff that I am going to teach in the monologue workshop, is the same of how I attack a scene. It's the same. Yeah, there's certain things to learn, about. A lot of casting directors and people teach how to audition, There's that part of it, but I'm teaching how to work on the monologue. I might tell you some things of how, when you actually perform it, but it's not about that so much as is it about how to work on text, and I find the same things I do with a scene is what to do with a monologue. There's something different that I do, though, that comes from what I learned from Zoe Caldwell, and this also comes from Stella Adler, who was Meisner's best friend. They were much bigger on punctuation than a lot of Meisner teachers are. Because a lot of Meisner, what happened was, and I don't know how this happened, this could be, because I'm interested in talking about that thing you said about, is there a difference between European American, teaching of it? Somewhere, I'll tell you this, Judy, what happened, somewhere down the line, because I meet actors all the time that when they start first working on text, they don't at all follow any punctuation. Because Meisner taught them, the Meisner technique taught them to be free, right? To be 100% free. So you don't know how it's going to come. You don't know how you're going to say the line. And that's what Meisner's after. It has to be impulsive, right? But then they throw out, they're doing Tennessee Williams and they're not doing what Tennessee Williams wrote. And it's a big problem. I discovered that it's both. You have to, because I'm a director and I direct Tennessee Williams and different things, and I work hugely from punctuation. The script gives you all the clues, and the punctuation gives you all these clues. And so you have to, a period, a full stop, a statement, you have to do it as a statement. You cannot make it iffy and up and maybe or a question. And I work with many actors, even professional actors, and they change the punctuation. And then they have to learn from me. No. So what I learned was, so what I'm saying is punctuation's a huge thing that I throw into the mix, into when we start working on text. I use the things that Meisner taught about how to craft things, and how to craft super objective actions, beats, actions, intentions. But I also use punctuation. The text gives you all the clues, but many actors don't use the punctuation. And because what I found is you can learn, Judy, I can learn the punctuation technically, just like we learn the words, Meisner said, learn the words technically by rote. So that's different than acting. It has nothing to do with your acting. That's just technical. So, right. So learn, and I say you learn that with punctuation is technical. How? So I will say the line as a period, or I will say it as a question, or I will say it as a dash, that it's an interruption. But how do I say it? There's still 500 different ways to say it, but it will be a question because that's how it's written. I'll learn it technically that it's a question, but I don't know how I'm going to ask that question, but I will say it as a question. And so I'm really big on text, on using punctuation with the text.
Do you have any scheme of work with the text?
Any what?
Any scheme program of work with the text?
Like a system, you mean?
Yes.
Like an order?
Yes.
Interesting question. Yes, I mean, there's an order that I teach them about. I teach them about punctuation, but then I also teach them about what I teach them about is about super objectives, how to find that script analysis, how to find the super objective, how to find the objective, how to find the actions. It sounds like, if you're going to go through a scene, a monologue or scene, let's say a scene right now, you're going to go through a scene, you're going to work on a scene, and you're going to look at it and you're going to find, what are my actions? Acting is doing. It's always doing, doing, doing. What am I doing? It's not about thinking. Remember everything we've learned up to now? It's not about thinking. What happens to a lot of actors is, remember I said most acting classes is working on scenes. They try to find out intellectually what they're doing in each moment of a scene. And they try to act that. And you can't. It's such a strange thing. You have to know how all those things that we learned in Meisner, why I think it's the best foundation I've ever found. You have to learn all these things about letting go and how to craft and be specific and all that. It's with text, it's the same thing where you have to take the clues from the text and the punctuation and what the text is giving you and find things out about your character. So you can even craft, what am I doing here? I'm trying to get this person to love me. I'm trying to, I want them to leave town. I want, I want them to understand the equation. I want, you know what I mean? I can find things that I need, that I want, my action that I'm doing. It doesn't mean, all it does is it gives you a path. You understand, you know what you're doing, but you don't know how you're doing that. It's a combination of both. And that's why it's advanced work. It really takes, you'd have to know to let go and trust instincts, to know that, okay, I want Judy to go with me, but I can't act how I think that's going to be. I just have to know it and trust it, and now let my instincts take over, knowing I want her to come with me. And that leaves it open where I don't know what's going to happen. But see, actors get into so much trouble. Most acting classes, and what I find from students come to me from, like I said, study different things. But one of the biggest problems they have when they come from Chubbuck or different things, they're coming from different techniques, is they decide an objective and they hold on to that objective for dear life. And Meisner said, you can't. You must know it and you must let it go. Know it, but you don't know. You can't anticipate what's going to happen. Yeah. So so I have a process that I work with the text, and it's to learn about how to discover actions and objectives of the scene and super objectives, how to use punctuation, define these things, how to make decisions. And then we're going to do, in the class, you're going to find out, do you have an emotional prep? Where are you coming from? What's the relationship? Yeah, because you've learned it, not intellectually. That, actors, they think it's brother and sister, so they act like what they think a brother and sister should be. No, you've learned you can't do that. You have to let go, but you know how to craft it specifically, a relationship. So we just go through the list. What do you have? An activity? A lot of scenes have activities built in them. Someone's doing something. Or I even when I worked with directors, or like Meisner directed us in some of the thing, he gave us an activity to do that wasn't even in the scene. It's like, wow, oh, why I could be polishing my shoes. You know what I mean? He gave me polishing my shoes in this. It made the whole scene different and alive, because I was busy polishing my shoes, and then, you know what I mean? And it worked for the scene, and it's amazing. And obviously, and one of the biggest things I find for monologues and scenes is this emotional prep thing. How, it's what brings a depth to the work, to your acting, and a life to the acting that otherwise wouldn't be there. Some scenes you don't need it. You don't need emotional prep every time. Meisner said, hey, you tell an actor, hey, here's the scene, you're being left, someone's leaving you. You go, okay, here we go, someone's leaving me. But there's many scenes that can't be that can't be done without emotional prep. It's going to help you come into the scene. And again, what we learn from it is, and many actors make the big mistake of holding on. They think it's about emotion, holding on to emotion, because they think that, because we see actors being emotional. Meryl Streep gets emotional, but it's not about emotion. The emotion comes from really doing, and it'll change all over. Bad actors, you can tell, inexperienced and bad actors, they stay the same emotion. That's the big, they think the scene, they're supposed to be mad, so they stay mad. That is not what we do in life. We're at a funeral, we're sad, and we make a joke and we laugh.
Sure, it's changing all the time.
All the time, every second.
Fluctuation constantly. Yeah.
Yeah.
But sometimes actor is in front of the camera and he don't have a partner and people in this. And what there? What then?
I talk about it a lot. That's one of the two biggest questions I get all the time is that, like, if you're alone, and two, what if I'm doing a monologue, even on, like, I'm on stage or something, or in front of the camera, I'm doing a monologue and I'm not working off a partner, because, you know, they hear from me, Steven, you keep saying working off of and listening and doing and all this. And they say, what about monologues? You're not, you know, and it's still.
Yes, but if you have a camera, sometimes you don't have a partner.
That's right. Sometimes you do. Good actors will. I have a great story of that 80th anniversary I did of the Playhouse, you know, that I put together. We were honoring that Richard Pinter, and we were honoring Eli Wallach, the great actor Eli Wallach. He was in the many films. He's in The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly with Clint Eastwood. He's the ugly. That's Eli Wallach. He's in many films. He passed away too several years ago. He, what was I going to say? I was mentioning him. I just forgot what I was going to say. What were we talking about?
We were talking about not having a partner and doing.
Okay, thank you. The 80th anniversary. Thank you. The 80th anniversary, we were honoring Eli Wallach. He did a film called The Holiday. It's a great, watch this film, The Holiday. It's with Kate Winslet. It's about like three couples, three different, you know, and three different stories kind of tied in together. And one of the stories is about a woman in her 30s, whatever, 40, with her relationship with a grandpa guy, you know, an older guy. And that's Eli Wallach and Kate Winslet. And we had called Kate Winslet up. We left a message with her saying, would you come and honor him at this gala that I was doing? Will you present to him? You know, she's busy as all. It's Kate Winslet. You know, we're expecting a no. Thank you for asking me, but no. We get a call back, and it's Kate Winslet saying, yes, name the date. I will be there. Why? She said, that man is one of the most amazing actors in the world that I've ever worked with. And here he is, 87 years old, doing the scenes, and they're filming her parts, you know, the camera, like you're saying, Gosha, they're filming her parts, just the camera on her. And he could have been, like a lot of actors, he could be in his dressing room or sleeping or something, right? He, at 87 years old, was there for hours, for 3 hours, being there on the other side of the camera, just so she could see him and see his face. Not even having lines back, just that he would stand there for her.
Impressive.
She said that doesn't happen with people in the movie industry and stuff and everything, Hollywood. And she said, my God, the guy's amazing. He helped me be better. Isn't that something? True story. And again, I think that comes from these actors, is people that learn things like from Meisner and stuff about what the real work is about, you know? So when I'm going to teach this monologue class, and when I talk to actors about it, because we really haven't done it in class much in the workshops, which I'm going to probably add it, is it's all these things still that you learn from Meisner. Acting is doing. So when I teach a monologue, one of the first things is you're talking, you have to know, you have to craft things specifically. Who are you talking to? You know, you have to be specific. Who are you talking to? If I do a monologue, if I talk to my mom, that monologue, it's going to be very different than if I talk to a bunch of Girl Scouts. Or if I talk to my boss that I hate. Or, you understand, it changes everything. You have to know who you're talking to. Now, you're doing a play. you're doing a monologue. You have to know who you're talking to. Sometimes you're talking to the audience. In Shakespeare, you're talking to the audience. I believe one of the greatest actors in the world right now, and I think I even say that he might be the greatest actor in the world right now, is Mark Rylance. And when he talks, he does Shakespeare a lot, but he does everything. Mark Rylance, he was the artistic director of the Globe Theater. When you see him do Shakespeare, you know, Shakespeare has these monologues, soliloquies, and monologues that talk to the audience, but he's very specific in how he, you know, you got to know you're talking to the audience, and if you're talking to the audience, like in Shakespeare, you have to really use the audience and really talk to them. It's all about really talk.
But the audience give me a reaction. Yes,
That's right. That's
but
right.
the camera not.
Okay, that's
not
right.
have a reaction.
So that's why in camera work, it's very important for you to decide who you're talking to. Are you talking to your dead grandmother? Are you talking to an audience? You would have to decide who that audience is, you know, most of the times it's not to an audience in film. It's a monologue that a lot of times you're talking to yourself, or you're talking to yourself as a child that you were, or, you know, you can be very specific. Once you start getting specific and deciding who you're talking to, then that's the first step. That really helps you tremendously, right? You can't just talk to talk. Yeah, you have to know who you're talking to. You have to be specific. See what the clues of the script. You can, oh, it's like this. By the way, I don't mean literally what you're talking to. Sometimes in a monologue, the camera's filming you, and you have to say something because you're talking out loud. You can decide who you're talking to, that the audience, it's just like an emotional prep. The audience will never know who you're talking to. They're going to relate it to the story, to the drama of the scene. You get me? So it's the same. You have to decide, just like an emotional prep. You don't have to do an emotional prep. This is a big thing I teach that hits, you know, in a stadium, in a soccer stadium, the exact row and the seat in that stadium. You do not do that. That's too hard. You don't have to get that exact emotion that's exactly that seat in a stadium. No, you only have to do that stadium, which is here. You understand? Because the emotion in the scene will take care of the rest, meaning that's this stadium. A different scene is this stadium over here. You might have to do an emotional prep that goes in that direction. But that's all you have to do, is get in that right direction. You don't, same thing with emotional prep, or with who you're talking to, the specifics you come up with. You have to choose who you're talking to, a specific that works, that's in the right path of that scene, that monologue. But the audience will never know exactly, you know, but it's all about making choices. There we go. Let's say it's all about making choices. Advanced work, when you're acting, is all about choices, making choices and being specific. So you have to learn to make a choice and know who you're talking to. Two, I'm big on punctuation, using the punctuation and the clues from the script. The punctuation will give you the path of the monologue that will help your acting, almost like takes care of 50% of your acting. I say, you're doing that monologue in front of that camera and you follow that punctuation, it's going to give you your acting, you know, because you're doing the statements, the periods where they are, you're doing questions, you're doing the path it gives you. So now you know who you're talking to, you're following the punctuation, and you start learning these things about, what am I doing, these actions, what's my objective of the scene. You know that, but you make decisions on it, but then you let go. That's all the crafting, all the work that you decide before you do the monologue, before they roll, say go with the camera and you do this monologue. Then you actually let go, but you've done your work. You've done this work that it's going to color it. It's going to give you a path. And the biggest thing is the emotional prep. coming in to, you're doing a monologue, and the camera's filming you. We're going to film, right? The camera's filming you, Gosha, and it says, you know, your planet has been destroyed. You know, the monologue is your planet has been destroyed. Your planet of your species has been destroyed. Well, that may mean nothing to you. And it says in the monologue, you're supposed to be emotional. You just have to do an emotional prep. And if you learn how, it doesn't matter, you know, it could be about, who knows what you're using, but you're not using your past real, like Judy said, an actor's going to go, oh my God, they're about to film in 2 minutes and I'm supposed to be emotional. I gotta be emotional. It's all about being truthful. So what can I do? What can I do? Think, okay, my cat died last week. My cat died, Fluffy. And I think about my cat that died. They do this all the time because they got to be emotional for this scene. So they think Meisner gives us the tool. You don't have to do that. You can use your imagination. I can do it. Give me 30 seconds, 60 seconds. I can get somewhere. Again, you don't hold on to it. If I do an emotional prep and then, you know, Diane Keaton says, they're about ready to film. She goes, give me just 2 seconds, 3 seconds. You understand? And she just 3 seconds, 4 seconds. She gets, and even before she gets grounded, she has one emotional prep, Judy, that's there, that she doesn't do all the way, but it's right there. And she can say, Heidi, okay, let's film, get ready. And then right before the camera starts rolling, she thinks about that emotional prep, you know, what she's using. The camera starts rolling and it does something to her, but this is the toughest thing. Great actors let go. She just trusts that let's see what happens. My God, that's vulnerable. That takes a lot of courage to do that, to say, let go, let me just trust it, and let the text, with that emotional prep, the text is like you're in the canoe, and the text and the emotional prep's the water, you know. The water can be rough, can be just, let's see how the canoe goes down the water. Let the emotional prep color the canoe, how it goes down the river, and then do it and trust it and see what happens. That's a lot to learn. You do that, but then you can do a monologue in front of a camera and you don't have to, you're not self-aware worrying about what am I doing? Who am I talking to? How do I do this monologue? There's work to do, but then you can let go, really let go, and you'll be okay. And you can do 10 takes. And because I say this stadium thing, you'll be same in the same. It shouldn't be drastically different, but it'll be different. Some actors do drastically different because they're just guessing at things. I'll tell you, if you're going that right ballpark, the right stadium, it's going to be different. It should be different all 10 takes, but in the same. Does that make sense, Judy? In the same area, not like you're all of a sudden going to be crazy. Now you're doing the whole thing laughing. You know what I mean? It's like,
yeah. It's slightly different because you commit to it every time, like from scratch, right? You have to be there, truthfully, every moment, yeah. And
yeah. So it should be different because of that. It should be different. But if you're working specifically, I've found that it's going to be in the right area instead of in the wrong area.
Yeah. But then you have a director who will guide you.
Yeah. If you have a good director, they're going to help you a lot. Most of us will have bad directors, but then that's why if you have great tools, you can listen to a director and say, look, I want you to do it where you're laughing on that line and this and that. And your job is that you have to make that happen truthfully. That's what I tell actors. Then if I feel it's wrong, but that director wants that, and sometimes you don't know their vision. Let me tell you, film is a director's medium, not an actor's medium.
Yeah. True.
It's a director's medium. The director can. So your job is to try to. Yes, you got to use your instincts. I'll tell you, because some directors don't even know how to deal with actors. They know everything else. They're doing all the technical stuff and they're good at it. but they don't know really. That's why they hire great actors, because they don't have to worry about it. The great actors do what they, do half the job for them of that part of it. The problem is that area where you don't have actors that are that skilled, and you have directors that don't really know how to work with actors, which you get a lot of the time. Today's world, I find there's less and less real directors that really know how to help the actor be truthful and be free, which is ultimately what they want, to be truthful, but they think they want it, that they think they want a result. But if they're smart, like I direct, I want truth. We pray for truth. There's all these famous stories about things that happen accidentally on set, on film, and they keep that part because it's real. But a lot of bad actors, something happens that they didn't think was supposed to happen, and they like stop, and they're like, he was not supposed to pick up the flowers then. But that's not what great actors do. Can you imagine? Marlon Brando went with everything. That's why they kept things that happened impulsively, spontaneously. He was so good at it. Everyone else, it made everyone else alive. You're working with Marlon Brando, you had no idea what you're going to get. It's the scene, but you have to be alive. Yeah. Now, if we have any time, I know you might have some other questions, but I'm very interested in this thing of what Judy said about, how'd you say it, Judy? About like, is there a difference? Is there an American
different approach? Yeah.
Different approach. That's a good word. Approach. Is there an approach to American Meisner or European Meisner? Mentioning like Tom Radcliffe, as we know, brought it to Europe. Brought it to London first, and that's how it expanded to Europe. Do you have anything about that? I'm very curious about that.
What do you say, Gosha? No, it's just that observing your workshops, I just saw some differences. And also, I have a friend who studied in New York. She learned a Meisner technique, and I used to do the repetition with her, and it was just a different experience,
I find, like I was trying to say in the email I sent you or back, I find that it's really not a American European thing, even though we may categorize it as that right now. We're starting to, like, just this last couple of years is the first time. It's not the first time I've heard this before. In this last couple of years, I've heard this from a couple other people about American way of thinking. And, this is my first impressions, my first thoughts of it are that it's not really that, it's just teachers are different, depending.
That's for sure.
For teachers are different, and how you, but it's like, Tom, I don't know. I mean, Tom and I know of each other, and we've talked by email and stuff. We've never met, but we've talked by email, and we know of each other. Because I teach so much over there now too. Many of our students, we have many of the same students. Many actors that stay with me have studied with Tom and studied with me. And I think that's really cool. They tend to say to me, I don't know what they say to Tom, but they tend to say to me, I studied with Tom too, and I studied with you, and you're both really good, really strong. You're both really strong with the work, but you're different. So I like getting different things from both of you. You know what I mean? That's what I hear from a lot of the students. Judy, what I've heard,
but what's the difference?
Well, the difference, I don't know. I haven't seen Tom teach. Did you study with Tom, or someone that studied with Tom, probably, right, at the Actors Temple, or did you?
Yeah. I did workshops with Tom. Now I also, he's doing the Meisner talks now online, and I'm also attending.
I only observe his.
Good. Yeah, I'm going to start doing more of that, and I'm setting those up now, and I need to. I've done some live Q&As and questions and stuff, and I'm doing some big ones coming up that are going to be bigger platforms where I'm figuring it out myself. You know, you can tell me any suggestions you have. We're all
No, we
figuring
did.
it out now.
Yeah, we did like one workshop online, and we're starting with the online
Yeah.
path because there's
Yeah.
no other way to do it.
Right,
You know,
right,
there are
right.
some elements of the technique that can be
Right.
done online, right?
Yeah, I'm starting out with where I'm going to do this monologue workshop, and I'm going to do another one of emotional prep, because we can, you
Yeah.
know, but I'm starting with that. I'm not starting with a workshop one, you know, repetition thing,
I
even
think
though
it's I don't think it's possible, and the
well, you
improvising
can do like I'm like a group. The other day, what happened was a group that I work with in Amsterdam, excuse me, they meet, you know, they used to meet, all the cities I teach, many of them meet privately every 2 weeks, every second Sunday, to do repetition, because you can always practice repetition. When we worked with Sandy, he said, practice repetition, practice repetition. We had to do a ton of it outside of class. So I try to tell my students, get together, do repetition. Do it for a short time. You only do it for a short time with someone, 4 minutes, 5 minutes, not longer than that, and then switch with someone. You can do that, but you can't do more than that, because you need a teacher there. You know, you need a teacher to do activities and things beyond. You have to have a teacher, but you can practice repetition. So, but now they're doing it by Zoom, you know, practicing repetition, you know, like,
really wow.
yeah. So like you, and so they had me on, and I'm learning some things, but the thing is like I was watching them, and it was very hard, Judy, for me not to come in and say something, you know, because they're doing some things wrong, you know. And when I say wrong, not things that aren't helping them, you know, they're doing some things that are keeping them. It's not about right or wrong. It's about, well, how can your acting be stronger? They're doing some things that are keeping them from, you know, from following every impulse and listening 100% in their thinking some moments. So I got to figure, I don't know, you
It's
know,
difficult.
I did work repetition with someone, like if I did with you, I can do it right now with you, Judy, and I can do repetition to practice. But there's some things, you know, that help to have a teacher, because, you know, you could practice something wrong too. It's good to do repetition, but it's while you're actually learning with a teacher. You can practice repetition, but you got to keep learning and practicing with someone helping you at some point. You know what I mean? So you can know what you're not
Yeah,
doing
definitely.
wrong.
Because if you're in the experience, you cannot like be the
Right.
observer at the same
Yeah.
time. This is
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
impossible. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So
Yeah.
I totally get what you say.
But I want to look into, so I don't know how I can set up, I don't, so I don't know how I can do a workshop of repetition and everything. And people, maybe, I mean, I think right now what I'm going to start, because I'm going to do this big Q&A thing with like a lot of people. It's going to happen. Like someone's helping me with that in next Saturday or something. I'll let you know about it.
Ah,
Let you
sure.
guys know
Please
about it.
do.
You know, because I can talk like we are and help you with the things that you need to try, that will help you be stronger, that will help you with the repetition, that will guide you to be the Meisner work, you know? So it's talks, and I can talk a lot about it. I don't know right now how much I can help you. Maybe I think I'm going to teach you, like if I was working with you two can do repetition, see, and then I can stop and I can help you and teach you. So I think we can do I can really help with repetition, but we can't do that thing that you're in the room together. You know what I mean? I mean, coming to the door and stuff, but I can help you too with repetition. You know,
Yeah,
I don't know,
that's
how would you
interesting. Yeah.
do how would you do that? I'm not sure how you would do with, you know, the exercise of coming in the door and stuff and being together. You would have to be with someone or something, like someone's with you at your house when you start
Yeah,
getting
Zoom has
more.
this function of like breakout rooms that you can divide the group into like separate rooms, but they are in the room that you set. Nobody's coming inside. This is the tricky part. Yeah.
Yeah. Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, but I'm yeah, so we'll start, you know, figuring it out, and I'm
Yeah.
curious too, and what we can do. But I'm very interested in this thing about what we were saying about, like Tom, I was saying, and bringing it over to the one thing that I've heard from my, like I said, to the students that stay with both of us is that you tell me, Judy, but he tends to do more on emotional level than me. But it's what I want to say about that is that, again, it's a process, right? And what I'm really big on is how I learned from Meisner about really doing. You'll notice in my workshops, I'm big on demands. You got to do something. And I don't know if Tom was big on that with the demand thing, because he was attacking it from a deeper level of emotional that will then make things happen. But it's really, to me, you're going to get to the same thing. That's how I
Sure.
feel. Now, I don't know Tom teaching, I don't know, but from what I hear and from what's going on, and I know from Gary Condas too a little, that you're that it should still get to, when I teach this really doing, and to really do, how impulses, how instincts really work, is you can't just observe. And yes, you could, I feel that Tom and them do that. If I'm observing, we're working off each other, I need to express how I feel with how you're making me feel, right? You know, we have to get to that, really get to that. I find that that will come from you doing something about what you get. That you can't only, Gosha, say what you see. That's a start. You have to say what you see. And deeper than that will be if you start expressing how that person makes you feel, right?
Mhm.
But you got to do something about it. That's how instincts really work. Really, yes, you can start getting connected, Judy, to how you feel. You must get connected to what you must be available to your rich own emotional life. You must be available to that. And maybe there's different ways into that. I find that the way into that is through what Meisner was big on us in, is doing. That stuff will come, and it comes a little later down the process. Not my first workshop things, people get emotional, things happen, but we don't attack it that way. It hits way more. The way I work, Judy, I found, is that it happens really big, starts happening down the process as you start really doing and making demands. So Gosha, I don't know if you know, I teach, am I saying it right? Gosha?
Gosha, yeah.
Gosha.
Yes.
Judy, so I'm really big on demands, meaning a lot of times we think demands is a negative thing. Like, you know, you don't like someone telling you to do something, but demands don't have to be negative. They can be, please hug me. They're not negative, they're all over the place. But at first, Judy, people think they're negative. People think, stop doing that, turn away from me.
Yeah,
But
but this is also true that I heard of demands the first time on your workshop.
I
I
know,
never
and
heard
I have to
Tom
say,
stressing it. Mhm.
yeah, but I have to say that, and see, this may be one thing goes to why we're saying American, European. Maybe Tom, just when I worked with Meisner, you had to, and especially this Richard Penter under Meisner, is you had to do something about what you're getting from the other person. Acting is doing. It all comes back down to, they kept doing. Acting is doing. The great example I give in class, this will help Gosha, is a lot of actors do this, which is a start, but the example I give is you're at the pool, you're at the edge of the pool, Gosha, and Judy's in the water, and you say, you're sinking, you're turning blue, bubbles are coming up, you're on the bottom of the pool, you've died. You've said everything true. You're working off Judy. But is that how instincts work? No, instincts don't work from just, and you might even say, you're making me sad. You understand? You might get to deeper level of emotion, but that's not how instincts really work, Meisner said. They were instinctual is doing something, fight or flight or fight, that thing. That's how instincts work. So maybe, Judy, maybe because of these shorter workshops, I'm stronger about it. But so I think that's the difference maybe, but it's just me as a teacher, and maybe Tom didn't happen to do that and how he worked and getting into things. So maybe it feels like a little different. Like you said, it feels a little different, but it should be still. There might be some things I'm missing that Tom teaches, that maybe I miss a little bit, but then it should be, to me, it has to be about demands too. Meisner said you have to, but I don't know. It's interesting.
Yeah, so I discovered demands with you. This is for sure. Also, Tom stresses the fact that actually the other person is in you, that it becomes the common experience while doing the repetition. Yeah, that
Like what? Meaning, you mean about the connection? Is that really talking about the connection? Yeah, a lot of people, it's really big because, and I'm glad he does that, because a lot of people, like I said, remember I said you're wearing a blue shirt, I'm wearing a blue shirt, where a lot of people don't understand. They think it's about repetition or something. It's not. It's about this connection. We should, like you're saying, I like that. You're saying it's like we should be one. If you're truly connected, right? Is that what he's trying to say? That you're in me and I'm in you. Yeah, I mean, it's really should be about that connection. But I'm curious, like, I don't know. I don't know much about what you would call the European way. You'd have to tell me something. There's more. I mean, every teacher, like I said, every teacher is a little different, and I might be bigger on making this about doing, and the emotional life will really come from that, especially as we start going down this process more. Oh, one thing I can say about it is let's say this. I'm curious about this, Gosha. One thing is it's a process, right? And in the process, things change. So I was thinking about this before we talked today. When we did activities, let's say, for example, independent activities, when we first did them, first, how you do them without a reason for doing them, right? You got to start. You got to start about learning. Just do anything that's difficult. 100, it takes 100% of your concentration, so it can help you to focus. Why is that? So you're not aware of yourself. Now you can be free. You'll do what you do, right? Your focus will be off yourself, right? Then you do a second level of the activities, which happens in the last couple of days of the second workshop, is about doing it with a reason. And that's hard at first, and they don't know. And that continues in workshop 3, workshop 4, workshop 5, workshop 6. You're always doing it. Even though we're learning new things, you're still exploring activities with a reason, right? Then, as you start getting into relationships, my 4 and 5, I introduce a new way of activities. And Esper talks about this in Meisner. See, it's activities that don't necessarily follow. It's not about the difficulty of it. That brings a lot of times frustration, you know what I mean? Anger and frustration, right? But no, it's not about that. We call them advanced activities, where it's about the emotional life of an activity. What you do something, it's not about why you're doing it, the difficulty or why you're doing it. It's more what you're doing that might affect you. What you're doing.
That's interesting.
Yes, what you're doing. So they're more advanced, we call them advanced activities, which are more emotional activities, meaning it doesn't have to start then once you've done these four workshops and you're doing activities, and it follows those kind of rules that they're just to help you, you know, really do something and learn about being specific. Then it's about, Gosha, doing an activity that you can write a letter to a boyfriend, even though writing a letter is not the best thing in the first activities, you understand, because it's too much from here.
It's intellectual, yeah.
It's intellectual, but once you start learning about activities and that you don't work from here, then you can, just like repetition, we start dropping repetition some more and more. When I do relationship workshops, you don't have to repeat every second. You can go, there's long periods of silence. You don't have to repeat every second. You've already learned how to not work from here. So the repetition starts, I keep it there a little bit, like you can repeat, but you don't have to all the time, you know?
So, yeah, so when do you drop the repetition in your
I don't think about it as dropping it. I just, because Esper will say, he has a chapter that he says, drop the repetition. It's not so much, I find it too stark, you know what I mean? Like I just gradually, it should be that you don't, I tell my students, Judy, you don't think of it that you have to repeat. You've done 4 workshops now of this repeating, you know what I mean? And you know how to listen well, and you start getting strong. Now trust it. And now, because you know how to work from impulses, not the brain, you can change more and not repeat and not, you know, so it starts, I say, still repeat something if you need to, like, so you don't think of anything, you know, you still might repeat what someone does or says, what someone says, but you don't have to all the time. So I kind of let it kind of start fading away, you know. Think of it that, not all of a sudden just dropping it. I just kind of slowly just tell them, if you start telling them, you don't have to repeat so much because they're getting stronger at it. It's already affected them now. Now you can start to just trust it, and you can repeat, or you don't have to speak. You don't have to talk, or you might change right away. Then it starts happening naturally. I still have to tell them or stop them when they're working or saying you're working from your head. You're not, trust your impulse, you know. But what was I was going to say about that I think I wanted to bring something back about, you know, this thing of saying that it's a process that things change, like the activity can start to change some, and it can be that I can write a letter now to Gosha. You could write a letter to leave a boyfriend, to leave your fiance. You've already learned that you're using a real fiance. You're not making up a fiance. You're using a real fiance. You know what I mean? You're using your real guy or gal. You learned all these things. You're being specific, but it's what you're doing. It's that a good example is you're learning a song on the guitar, or to sing a song, that when you hear that song, the first 3 notes of that song always make you cry. That's a good advanced activity to do. You get emotional learning that song. Learn that song. Yes, you still need to be specific. You need to learn the song. You need to really do. But you're getting emotional because of what you're doing, because you're learning that song. And we call those advanced activities once you've learned how to do activities. So things kind of change. And I wonder, with like saying American or European, I think we're all, you know, if we know if the work is really the true work of the Meisner, we're getting to the same thing, but there might be little different paths to get there, but it should still get to the same thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, I think our time is slowly finishing, because I just said this interview for 2 hours. Gosh, it's been 1 hour 45 minutes. I can't believe it.
Wow.
But yeah, it's pretty long. So Gosha, would you like to ask Steven something more, something else?
Maybe one question. How do you remember Sanford Meisner?
Good question. I had him when he was, you might see those videos of him teaching, and he looked like that, but he was that was in like 87 or something, 84, 85. And I had him in 90, 91. And so he was old like that and fragile, but he was, and he didn't, ready for this? He did that talking where he had to swallow air to make, because he was such a stubborn mother. Can you imagine? Because he had 3 operations, and the third one they had to take everything out of his throat because he wouldn't stop smoking. Can you imagine?
Yes, I watched the film with him, so I can hear his voice.
Yeah, and he had to learn. So we had him when he was doing that. He had to swallow air. So, but what was amazing about it is it's amazing. I probably talk too much, and Meisner talked very little, and bam. You know what I mean, Judy? I mean, imagine he just said it, and he had to be short and right to the point. And so there's something nice about, I'll talk to you and I'll help you, and I talk a lot, and that can be helpful, but also it can be helpful. What we learned so bam with Sandy, he was so
Specific.
precise and direct and short. It was just bam. He would say this and say that, and he said only what he needed to say. And that's what I remember most from him, that it was unbelievable that he would just say 3 words to me, and it was right on the money. It was everything, Judy.
Oh my.
No, it's crazy.
Incredible.
Like in 3 words, 4 words, and you're like, holy man. It was still tough, and some things you didn't understand maybe at the time, but then you got there, you learned, that's what he meant. You know what I mean? But what I remember is he was so precise. I also remember he was a little more being older that he was, and more fragile, and he had his assistant with him helping him. He was funny too. He was funny, but all the stories from when all my friends that had stayed with him, my directors that I worked with that stayed with him 20 years before, all the stories are about how freaking tough he was and how he wasn't the nicest guy. You know what I mean? He was really old school tough. I mean, super tough. Like, you couldn't even do that now as a teacher. You'd go to jail. You know what I mean, Judy? he would hit you, or he would do he was old school. It was like, you know what I mean? He would get out of my class, go into the street, you're gone. I mean, every second, and I kicked people out and this and that, but I mean, he's so tough. He was. I didn't have him as tough because he was older and more fragile, but he was really on it. There were some days that if he was sick, I remember there was a day he was sick or not, and he was out of it, kind of. He couldn't. I remember him being sick one day and him not being able to teach that well. We were all like, wow, you know what I mean? Because he was older and sick. But I think he was 93 when he passed. So I had him, and that was in 97. So how old was he when I had him? I had him in 91. So he was 87 or something.
Or
yeah,
6.
He was 87, yeah. And just like, a very big teacher, another amazing acting teacher, coach, director just passed away yesterday, named Wynn Handman, Wynn, Wynn Handman. He had studied with Meisner. And he studied, and in his teachings, he used Meisner, but he used different things. Like he used different, I think he used Strasberg and Meisner and different things, but he was an amazing acting teacher. He just passed away yesterday, and he's been teaching up till this last year. He's 97.
Incredible.
Yeah. I hope I teach that long.
Yeah, we wish you that.
Yeah. But I remember him being so precise, and he was a little funny too at times, but which they said he wasn't. I think, he wasn't when he was younger. He was really tough. The stories are, I've heard stories that, wow, like really tough. And, if I could end with telling you one story of my experience with Meisner, what happened, that I remember to this day, I'll never forget. So we're working with Meisner, and it's like our second week. It's our second week, and I get up and I'm doing a repetition with this girl in our class. And at the time, when I just got a job in New York City at the famous Tavern on the Green, very famous restaurant in Central Park called Tavern on the Green. I got a job waiting on tables. When we went to the Playhouse, they said, you're not really supposed to have a job because you're spending so much time, it takes so much work. But a lot of us had a part-time job somewhere. We're living in New York City. It's so expensive. I don't even know how I did it. I don't know how I did it, Yeah, obviously had to have some money saved, but I was eating tuna fish every day. That's it. So I got a part-time job at Tavern on the Green, this restaurant, as a waiter. Just got the job like 4 days ago. It's like I'm going to my 5th day at work there. I'm supposed to be there at 5 o'clock because our class is supposed to end at 4. Okay. And I knew in our schedule, I had class till 4 with Meisner, right? I'm up. I was the last couple to go. It was like 20 minutes till 4. And I get up and work with this actress, and we're working. It's the second week. And I must have had so many problems, Judy, so many. I came from working at university, thinking everything, aware of myself, thinking, I was thinking up a storm, and I was aware of myself. I'd never learned in university about actually truly letting go. You know what I mean? I was always about me, 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 me. Meisner saw that. He said, oh my God. And he said, stop. You're terrible. I mean, he said, you're thinking all yourself. And I'm like, he said, try it again. Don't think, listen, to put your focus on her. And I just had so many problems, right? I was thinking and aware of myself and nervous, and I didn't know how to put my focus on the other person. And he got upset and everything. And he kept at me. I remember he was telling me, okay, try this and try this. And I also started worrying. It was 4 o'clock and we were going after 4. And I had to get to my job. But there's no way in the world that I'm going to stop and tell Sanford Meisner, Mr. Meisner, excuse me, I have to leave. Right? So I'm like, forget about it, Steve, just forget about it and try. So I had that going on. So I'm trying. This is a true story. He stopped. It was sometime after 4 where I knew I had to leave soon or I had to get there, but I had to stop thinking about it. He stopped me from working, and he had an assistant. That's this teacher in California now. I'll never forget. And he had this assistant, and he said, you have so many problems. He said, you have problems. You know what I mean? I was like, and I thought, I'm the worst actor in the world, Judy. I thought my life is over. You know what I mean? I'm standing there. The other girl he wasn't talking to, the other girl did okay, whatever. He had her sit down. I'm standing in the classroom. He's looking at me, telling me, he said, you have problems. And then I'm just standing there, and the whole class is standing there. And he, with his assistant, started talking to his assistant. They're whispering. And he looks back at me. And I'm standing there. They're talking about me. They're
Horrible. Yeah.
They're talking about me, and I'm standing there, and I think my life's over. I mean, I must be the worst actor in the world. And the class is standing there, and they keep talking different things, and they're agreeing on some things, this and that. And Meisner says to me, do you want to be a good actor? That's what he says to me, and the whole class. The whole class was silent. You could hear a pin drop, and I'm standing there, my second week, yeah, and he says, "Do you want to be a good actor?" And I remember, and started crying, you know. I was 24 years old, and I started crying, and I said back, "Hell yes," is what I said back. I said, "Hell yes, I do." He talks. He talks back, looks at me. I'm standing there, complete silence, crying. The class is looking. He talks, and then he says, Meisner says to the assistant, "Tell him," whatever. And the assistant says, "Okay, Steven, Sandy wants you to meet privately with us, with he and I, privately over the next 2 days." And I think, my God. And okay, so you'll set it up with me. What time? We want to work with you privately for a half an hour. And he gets up and they leave. He slowly leaves out the classroom. He's out slowly, and I'm standing there crying, thinking, I'm so bad. He's got to meet privately with me. My life is over. And soon as he got out the door, the whole class jumped up and went towards me going, "Oh my God, you're so lucky you get to work privately with him." And I thought my life was over. And we actually only met one time. We met one time privately, me in a room with Meisner and that guy, his assistant. And it was to show me a couple things of how I was thinking so much, and to make it real clear alone with me. He said, "Look, you think tremendously. He said, he named literally, when I was standing there in front of that group, that class, he said, he lived my life exactly. He said, "You've been acting in college." He didn't know anything. He didn't have my transcript in front of me. He said, "You've been acting in college. You've been doing this. You've been doing that." Oh my God, he called it all in the money. So then I met with him, and that one day he just helped me with a light bulb go off about how I don't need to think. You know that thing at first, Judy, that you don't need to think. So I worked with his assistant, and he showed me how, like I'll do this thing now, like the assistant will push me or something. I'll push someone on their shoulders. If it gets tough, I'm not there to hurt anyone in class, nothing. But when someone does something to you, something real like that, you go stop it. That's all you have to do. That's acting. You understand? Notice I made a demand.
Yeah.
Not you're pushing me. See, actors that don't do demands, it's not truly instinctual. It's like me going, Gosha, it's like me going, "You're hitting me. You're stabbing me. You're stabbing me with a knife. You're stabbing me again. You keep stabbing me. I feel bad that you're stabbing me." It's not how instincts work. He showed me that, Judy, that first day. Push the thing. Don't push me. You know what I mean? Yeah. Or, Meisner even did something with me. Like Meisner tapped me, and I said, "You're tapping me." He taps me again. So then I say, "Hey, cut it out." And then he showed me, oh my gosh, you know what I mean? He showed me, work off the person, do something. There's nothing to think. Changed my life. Changed my acting forever. And then it even changed my life that I didn't know about.
Awesome,
I
Steven.
hope that helps you. I could talk for 10 hours.
Yeah,
yeah, it helps a lot.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Steven. It was great seeing you.
Great. Yeah, it's great to see you. And I'd like to hear more. Yeah, I talked a lot, but I'd like to hear more. Actually, sometime I'd like to hear from you talking, or anything. I'm always interested in how
sure. Let's
teaching. And I'm interested. I'm very curious about Tom teaching and me teaching, and
Yeah, there's also Gary Kundaz and Simon Fernaz that Tom trained. They're a whole different story. They are all amazing. But
I heard great things about Gary. I don't hear much about this Simon for some reason. But I hear a lot about Gary because he's doing like me. He's teaching a lot of the cities that I teach in. What's interesting, there's a guy. I was supposed to teach in Geneva with Nicholas was bringing There's a guy that was in, there's this Nicholas that was in the class in Warsaw that's from Switzerland.
Yeah, Nicolas Fortini. Yeah, yeah.
And
He
he was
brought.
bringing, I find it interesting, he was bringing me and Gary at different times to Switzerland, which is neat because he says, I love you, both are great and you're different, you know, and stuff.
Amazing. Sylvia Kaczmarek, my partner, who established Laboratorium Meisnera, also was coaching there.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Cool. Great. Yeah, now, God, I hope things get a little better. I mean, we have to be, you know, the world's changed. I heard someone say it very interesting, put it in a really, I think, good perspective. You know, people keep wondering about getting back to normal, whatever. There's no, you know, I heard this very smart person say, after 9/11, right? 9/11 happened. Things changed. It didn't go back to normal. You can't go backwards.
Yeah.
Everything changed at the airports around the world. Everything changed. You know what I mean? Before 9/11, I brought an iguana. I had a pet iguana I would take on the flights with me, hidden in my coat. You know, all these things that
crazy.
Yeah. All these things, you know, not after 9/11, all these things changed. You don't go backwards. You can't go, it's a new normal. It's going to be, the world's got to change. We have to grow with it. We have to be smart. You know, some things might feel sad and everything. I mean, about like, we're not going to handshake as much and this and that, but there's many things we can do, and also things that we're going to grow and get better with and stuff. And that's the way to, I think we have to look at it. You can't try to go backwards. You have to go forward. Things change to a different normal because they can't be like before 9/11. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You have to be smart. And so, but let's just hope that, I mean, pandemics have happened. They're normal. I can't stand people that think any conspiracy theory, anything. There's nothing. We happen to have an uncle that's a scientist. It's normal. It just happens in the world. They knew it wasn't if it's going to happen. It was when it's going to happen.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Sure.
It's happened before in the past, like the Spanish flu, like the plague, and this and that. And it changes things. And the Spanish flu that killed so many people, millions, life went on after that. Things changed and everything, and life went on, and things changed differently, and scientists changed, and different things to learn and all that. And we're going to have to do the same, but hopefully, you know, we can get through it smart, you know, and get through it.
Yeah, and draw conclusions. You know, this is the the toughest part for some of us, but
And it's
everything's
tough
gonna be fine.
People working and artists, you know, like we have an audience, and how, you know, hopefully we can survive somehow, you know, and we're trying to do different things, and hopefully we can try to survive, and let's work together and stuff. And any ideas, I'm all open to anything that to do. You know, we should do a talk thing with some of the top acting teachers in the world, like a panel. Shouldn't we do like that?
Yeah, that would be amazing.
Wouldn't that be amazing to hear different teachers together? Like like I said, I've talked to Tom by email, and that's it. But wouldn't it be neat if it was Tom and me and some other teacher, a couple other teachers and this and that? And
maybe in Poland.
Yeah,
it would be nice.
Yeah, or now we have Zoom. We can meet, you know.
Yeah, maybe try.
All around the world.
There was a guy years ago. See, again, this was like 15 years ago. There was a guy when I was just starting teaching. I've been teaching 15 years now, and I was directing before that. There was a guy that, some smart guy that brought together Esper and like 4 other, some big, huge director that taught, and did a panel in the United States of like 5 of the top teachers talking. I have to look for it online, but it was pretty neat. You know, it was a big deal.
Yeah, it's a great idea. Yeah.
And anything else that like you're doing with your group, or if there's anything I can do with you or with people, I'm trying to figure out things too.
Yeah, thank you so
Interesting.
much. Let's talk about it.
Yeah,
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 because I think there are plenty new possibilities that the pandemic is bringing us.
yeah.
Also,
My
that is
wife,
the good side of it.
yeah, yeah. My wife, who's a hell of an actress, is there. I'll send you the link just in case you want to watch some of it or watch her. They did Saturday and the week before they had rehearsed some, and they got together this theater company in Florida that's trying to figure out how to do things and survive and stuff. And I directed with them before. Just this in February, I directed a fantastic play in Florida, and this theater company is doing a reading of Macbeth, is doing Macbeth, and my wife's playing Lady Macbeth, and it's actors. They were very smart from all around the world. So they rehearsed a little, and then they recorded Saturday. They did a Zoom of Macbeth, the whole play, 3 hours, and it's with actors from Australia, South Korea, Australia, United States, California, New York, all over.
Amazing.
And so the time thing was crazy. They did it like at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. They started in New York, but it was like 5 a.m. in South Korea and Australia and all that. And they did it. And so then I don't know, like if you recorded this, or I don't know how it works. Are you able to record this? Yeah, it says recording. Good.
Yeah, I'm recording it. We will post it.
They recorded it, and then they can edit it a little better. You know, they can edit it just because if they messed up a couple times or something, but that's okay because they went back, they did it. They're going to edit it, and and it's tonight that it streams worldwide, and there's been publicity about it and everything, so it's pretty neat. So you can listen.
Great. Please send us a link.
Yeah.
We'd love to see
we
it.
got to think of things like that, and we got to do things, but
yeah, intercontinentally, because we can. Now we can.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
Okay,
So,
Steven.
It's really great to see you, Judy, and it's a pleasure meeting you, Gosha.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank
Really, it was super helpful and interesting. And let's keep in touch. Okay.
Yes, please, and feel free. I mean, because I think it'll help us to get the word out more. Feel free to post this or do what you want with it, so people can find out and hear things about Meisner.
Of course, and we will tag you. Yeah,
just tag me and send me a link and stuff, and great.
Thank you. Bye.
Right.
Bye.
Ciao. Ciao.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.